Sarah Montgomery had always trusted her husband, Pastor Aaron Montgomery, with every part of her life. But when a routine DNA test uncovered a family secret tied to a dangerous criminal, Sarah's world was turned upside down. As Easter Sunday dawned, she discovered more than just the truth about her lineage. She discovered that everything she thought she knew was a lie. With the shadow of William Cross closing in, Sarah's search for answers led her to a chilling conclusion. The man she loved, the man she trusted, might be hiding something far darker than she ever imagined. The town of Jasper, Alabama, sat nestled between rolling hills and winding rivers, its landscape dotted with charming brick houses and quaint storefronts. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where church services were a community event, and where life moved at a slower, more peaceful pace. For the Montgomery family, Jasper was home, safe, familiar, and full of possibility. Aaron Montgomery, the town's beloved pastor, was a pillar of the community. His powerful sermons inspired his congregation every Sunday, and his unwavering faith and kindness earned him the trust and admiration of everyone around him. Sarah, his wife, was equally respected. She had an air of grace about her that made her the perfect partner to Aaron in their shared mission of helping others. At 35 years old, Sarah had built a life filled with love, family, and purpose. She was the mother of 2 young children, a devoted wife, and a central figure in the church, often volunteering in various programs that helped the less fortunate in the community. Despite her seemingly perfect life, Sarah had always felt an underlying curiosity about her family's past. Growing up, she never knew much about her biological father. Her mother had passed away when she was young, and her father was someone she rarely heard about. Raised by her aunt and uncle, she never felt an overwhelming need to question her family history. But as Sarah got older, a quiet sense of wanting to know more about her roots grew stronger. She had often wondered about her biological father, but life had always been so busy with raising children, supporting Aaron's ministry, and taking care of the household that the thought was often pushed to the back of her mind. That is, until one evening, while scrolling through social media, Sarah stumbled upon an advertisement for a popular DNA testing service. Intrigued by the idea of uncovering her heritage, she ordered a kit on a whim. It felt like a harmless way to pass the time and satisfy her curiosity. Little did she know that this decision would change everything. The DNA test arrived a few weeks later, and Sarah couldn't wait to send it off. She took the sample with a sense of excitement, eager to uncover the secrets of her ancestry. Weeks passed, and the anticipation built as she waited for the results. She was expecting to discover a mix of European roots, perhaps some Irish, British, or German blood, but nothing prepared her for what she would find. The results came on Easter weekend, the same weekend the church was preparing for its annual celebration. Sarah opened the email with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, unsure of what to expect. As she scrolled through the results, her heart skipped a beat. The first thing that caught her eye was a name, one she didn't recognize, linked to her biological father. It wasn't just a name. It was connected to a family member in a way that made her blood run cold. As she dug deeper, Sarah uncovered more startling information. A criminal history tied to the name, with links to several disappearances and unsolved cases across multiple states. The more she uncovered, the more unsettling the revelations became. Her mind raced. She had always known there were gaps in her family's story, but she never imagined that the truth would be this dark. Was this man involved in the crimes? Was she somehow connected to a dangerous past that had been hidden from her? As Sarah sat in the quiet of her home, the weight of this discovery began to settle over her. She knew she couldn't keep this from Aaron, but the thought of telling him filled her with dread. She wasn't sure how he would react or how he could possibly understand the gravity of what she had uncovered. As Easter Sunday approached, Sarah felt a sense of unease she couldn't shake. She tried to calm herself, telling herself it was just a coincidence, that there had to be some explanation. But deep down, she knew that the truth was something she couldn't ignore. Sarah's mind raced as Easter Sunday dawned, the bright sunlight spilling through the curtains of her bedroom. The quiet town of Jasper, Alabama, was bustling with preparations for the holiday service at the church. But Sarah could hardly focus on the festivities. The discovery she had made with the DNA test was haunting her thoughts, and every time she tried to push it aside, it crept back in, demanding her attention. The name she had uncovered wasn't just any name. It was the name of someone deeply involved in a dark past. Sarah had hoped that the results would give her a sense of identity, a connection to her family's history. Instead, it had opened a door to a disturbing truth she wasn't prepared to face. She spent the morning pacing around the house, staring at her phone as the results continued to flash in her mind. The more she researched, the more her stomach turned. The individual linked to her biological father had a criminal record, a long one. There were references to crimes committed in multiple states, unsolved disappearances, and even a few deaths that had gone unreported or overlooked. As Sarah combed through the details, the name William Cross stood out. William Cross had been known for his involvement in a string of disappearances dating back over 20 years. He had always managed to slip through the cracks of the law, evading any real punishment for his actions. It was a name Sarah couldn't shake from her mind. Was he connected to her father? Was she somehow related to someone who had hurt others? The weight of the discovery was too much to bear alone. Sarah knew she couldn't keep it from Aaron any longer. Her husband, the pastor of the local church, was the one person who had always been her rock, her constant source of support. But how could she share this with him? How could she tell him that the perfect life they had built together had been built on a foundation of secrets and lies? She tried to call Aaron several times during the morning, but he was busy preparing for the Easter service. His absence gave Sarah the time she needed to grapple with the growing anxiety in her chest. Each call she made to him went unanswered. Her fingers hovered over her phone, debating whether or not she should tell him before the service or wait until after. The idea of confronting the truth was paralyzing. She was terrified of how Aaron might react, of the damage this revelation could do to their marriage, to their family. Sarah knew deep down that she couldn't carry this secret for long. The more she uncovered, the more it felt like the walls were closing in on her. But despite the rising panic, she also knew she had to keep her composure. The town had always looked up to Aaron and Sarah Montgomery as a picture of perfection. They were the ideal family, the ideal couple. Their image had always been flawless. The thought of shattering that image was terrifying, but even more so was the thought of never knowing the full truth. With her heart pounding, Sarah decided to go for a walk before the service began. She needed some time to clear her mind, to figure out how to present the truth to Aaron without causing a rift in their relationship. The town was alive with the hustle and bustle of the Easter preparations, but Sarah felt detached, as if she were floating through the day on autopilot. She walked slowly, trying to push the dark thoughts out of her head, but they followed her every step of the way. As she wandered toward the church, a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the unease she felt about the DNA results. It was something else, a sense of impending dread. Still, she pushed forward, determined to face whatever came next. Little did she know that walk would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The secret she had uncovered was more dangerous than she could ever have imagined, and she was about to face the terrifying consequences of uncovering a truth she wasn't meant to know. As Sarah continued her walk down the quiet streets of Jasper, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the small town. The day was supposed to be filled with joy and celebration, but for Sarah it felt as though an invisible weight pressed heavily on her chest. Each step she took felt slower, more deliberate, as if the ground itself were pulling her into a deeper sense of dread. Her mind kept returning to the DNA results, specifically to the name that had appeared in connection to her biological father, the criminal history tied to it, and the chilling possibility that her family's past was not what she had always believed. She passed by familiar houses, each one representing a life she thought she understood. But now she was starting to question everything. How could she have spent so many years in the dark? How could she have been married to Aaron for so long, built a family with him, and still not have a clue about the secrets lurking in her own past? Sarah stopped for a moment in front of the old church, the towering structure that had been the center of her life for so many years. It was the place where she and Aaron had met, where they had built their life together. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as she stood there, thinking of her children, her friends, and the congregation that looked up to them. Her fingers traced the edges of the letter she had tucked into her pocket, the one she had written to Aaron earlier that morning. She had hoped to talk to him, to explain what she had discovered, but now that she was standing here, alone in the midst of it all, she wasn't sure she could go through with it. The letter felt heavy in her pocket, like a confession she wasn't ready to make. But as Sarah turned away from the church, a sense of urgency overtook her. She needed to know the truth. She needed to confront Aaron with the discoveries she had made, and she needed to do it now. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah found herself moving farther from the church, heading toward a small wooded area behind the churchyard that she often visited for some quiet reflection. But today the woods felt different, darker, more foreboding. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone or something was following her, closing in on her from behind. Her breath quickened, and she glanced over her shoulder several times, but no one was there. Yet the uneasy feeling lingered, gnawing at her. Just as Sarah reached the edge of the woods, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Aaron, asking if she was on her way back to the church. The simple text message, so innocuous on the surface, sent a cold shiver down her spine. She stood still for a moment, staring at the screen, her heart racing. She could feel the gravity of the moment. This was the point of no return. She could either go back to the church, pretend everything was fine and avoid the conversation that had been weighing on her, or she could follow through with what she knew was inevitable. The truth had to come out. As Sarah typed out a quick response, a movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. It was a shadow, dark and fleeting, but it was enough to make her freeze. Her pulse spiked and a wave of fear washed over her. She quickly pocketed her phone and turned to face the woods. The rustling of leaves grew louder, and her instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. She couldn't move, couldn't think. The terror that gripped her was paralyzing, as if the very air around her had thickened, trapping her in a moment she couldn't escape. Without warning, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, tall and imposing, his face obscured by the dimming light. Sarah's heart stopped as the man took a step closer, his intentions unclear, but his presence unmistakable. She recognized him instantly. It was William Cross, the man connected to her DNA results, the man whose name had haunted her thoughts for days. The realization hit her with a brutal force. She wasn't just related to a dangerous person. She was now standing face to face with him, and in that moment, she knew that the life she thought she knew was no more. The world around Sarah began to spin. Her breath caught in her throat as she took a step back, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The man before her was now just a name on a piece of paper. He was flesh and blood, and he was standing there watching her with an expression that sent a chill down her spine. And in the silence that followed, Sarah knew that the truth she had uncovered was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The tension in the air was suffocating, and Sarah's body went cold as the figure of William Cross stood before her. His presence was chilling, and for a brief moment, everything around her seemed to blur. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. The man she had only known through the DNA test results was now standing in front of her, and the connection between them, once theoretical, was now painfully real. She had no idea how he had found her or what he wanted, but deep down, she knew this encounter was far from coincidental. Sarah took a cautious step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet felt as if they were glued to the ground. She had no idea what to do or who to trust. All the research she had done, all the hours spent uncovering her family's darkest secrets, had led her to this point. She had unearthed something she wasn't supposed to know. And now, standing in front of the person who might hold the answers, Sarah realized just how much danger she was in. William's eyes were cold, calculating, as he studied her. There was no warmth in his gaze, no recognition of the family bond she thought they might share. Instead, there was only a quiet, ominous silence. Sarah's breath hitched as she struggled to maintain her composure. What did he want from her? What had she uncovered that was so dangerous? Before she could say anything, the sound of footsteps approaching from the churchyard startled her. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned, hoping for help. But the figure that emerged was not who she expected. It was Aaron. His face was tense, his expression a mix of concern and confusion as he looked between Sarah and William. He hadn't seen Sarah in hours, and he must have sensed something was wrong. "Aaron," Sarah called out, relief flooding her. She was desperate for him to understand the danger they were in, but as she turned back to face William, her words caught in her throat. William was already moving toward Aaron, his pace deliberate, his intentions clear. Sarah's heart sank as she realized that Aaron wasn't just a witness to this encounter. He was a part of it. Aaron's eyes widened as he recognized William. For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it quickly vanished, replaced by a cold indifference. It didn't take long for Sarah to realize that the man she had trusted, the man she had built a life with, knew more than he had ever let on. He had known William all along. "Sarah," Aaron said, his voice flat. "You don't know what you're getting involved in." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her thoughts raced, but nothing made sense anymore. She felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The perfect life she had built with Aaron, the man she had loved and trusted, was all a lie. The truth was more twisted and complex than she could have ever imagined. William Cross stepped forward, his presence imposing as he stood beside Aaron. "She knows too much," he muttered, his voice low but filled with menace. "And now she's a problem." Sarah's breath quickened. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Every instinct in her screamed at her to run, to escape, but her legs wouldn't move. She was trapped between two men who had been part of a web of lies and secrets she had never suspected. And the worst part was that Aaron, the man she had spent her life with, had been a part of it all. The realization that he had been hiding this dark truth from her, that he had been complicit in whatever was happening, shattered her entire world. Aaron's eyes met hers, and for the first time Sarah saw something she hadn't before. Fear. It was brief, but it was there. Aaron was afraid, but not of what Sarah had uncovered. He was afraid of something far worse. Sarah felt a cold wave of realization wash over her. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was afraid of losing control. As the minutes passed, Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. She had uncovered a dangerous truth, and now she was facing the consequences of doing so. Her heart told her she needed to run, to get away before things escalated further, but her feet were still frozen to the ground. Aaron's voice broke the silence once again, this time with a warning in it. "Sarah, you don't understand what you've gotten into. It's too late to turn back now." The words hung in the air like a threat, and in that moment Sarah understood. Her discovery had set something in motion, something that couldn't be undone. The man she had trusted most in the world was part of a far darker world than she had ever imagined, and now she was tangled in its web. With one last look at William and Aaron, Sarah knew she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The danger wasn't just a theory anymore, it was real, and it was closing in on her faster than she could escape. As the oppressive silence stretched between Sarah, Aaron, and William, time seemed to slow. The weight of the situation crushed Sarah's chest as she stood there, her heart racing and her mind struggling to process what was happening. It was as if the life she had known had split into two. The life she thought she understood, with its warm home, church, and family, and this cold, twisted reality that had been hidden from her for so long. The realization that Aaron, her husband, had been keeping such a dark secret from her shook her to the core. Aaron's eyes darted nervously toward William and then back to Sarah. He was trying to maintain his composure, but the tension in his posture betrayed the fear bubbling just below the surface. Sarah had always known Aaron as the calm, steady force in her life. His unshakable faith and unwavering presence had been her anchor. But now, standing before her, he looked like a man who had been trapped by his own choices, a man whose past had caught up with him in the most dangerous way. William's presence loomed like a dark cloud over the exchange. He didn't say anything more, but his eyes were fixed on Sarah, unblinking as if he was sizing her up. Sarah could feel the weight of his gaze, and it was clear that his motives were anything but benign. Her mind raced, thinking of all the worst-case scenarios. Was William here to threaten her? Was he trying to intimidate her into silence? And most terrifying of all, was she in physical danger? The overwhelming sense of fear almost paralyzed her, but something inside Sarah stirred. A quiet, determined part of her that refused to accept the helplessness creeping in. She had come this far, and no matter the cost, she couldn't let this truth remain buried. But how could she confront Aaron now? How could she expose the man she had loved and trusted all these years? Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to escape. But the reality was that there was nowhere to run. The walls were closing in, and the truth had already caught up with her. Aaron's voice broke through the tension, his words clipped and laced with urgency. "Sarah, you don't get it. You don't understand what this will mean for all of us. It's too late." She took a step back, her body instinctively pulling away from the weight of his words. His face was etched with fear, but there was also a hint of anger. Anger at her for uncovering something that was clearly meant to stay hidden. The man she had known, the man who had preached faith and love to their congregation, was no longer the person standing before her. Instead, there was someone else. A man who had been living a lie. A man who had let secrets fester until they threatened to tear everything apart. Sarah's mind raced, searching for a way out. The church, the town, her family, everything she had built her life around was slipping through her fingers. She had been so certain that she knew her place in the world, that she understood the dynamics of her life, but now it all felt like a facade. And the people she had trusted most were part of a world that was darker and more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. The quiet rustling of the leaves in the woods was the only sound that punctuated the stillness, a haunting reminder that time was slipping away. In that moment, Sarah knew there was no turning back. She had uncovered a truth that would change everything, and she couldn't undo it. The only question left was how far the lies stretched, and whether she could survive the consequences of exposing them. Before she could process her next move, Aaron stepped closer, his tone soft but firm. "Sarah, please, we can fix this, we can make it right." The desperation in his voice made her blood run cold. It was clear now, this wasn't just about keeping secrets. Aaron was trying to protect something far darker. It wasn't about their marriage, or their family. It was about something he feared losing more than anything: control. He had been hiding a truth so twisted and dangerous, and now it was threatening to unravel everything he had worked so hard to maintain. William, still silent, moved slightly, his shadow falling over Sarah as if to emphasize the growing danger in the air. Sarah's thoughts raced. There was no way to undo what had been done, no way to unlearn the truths she had uncovered. But there was one thing she knew for certain. She couldn't stay here, trapped in a world of lies and deception. She had to take control of her own fate. With one final look at Aaron, Sarah's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions anymore. She turned and walked away, leaving the woods, the church, and the dark secrets behind. She knew she was walking into an uncertain future, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she was taking the first steps toward her own freedom. The truth had been revealed, and while the consequences were far from over, Sarah knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The darkness that had surrounded her had finally been exposed, and now it was time for her to fight back.